and welcome to another episode of FooBar. I'm super excited that we are going to have an interview today. It's been quite a long time since I don't do one of these, and I have with me today James Beswick. We will talk about Serverlesspresso and how they build this application that was put in reinvent. So if you don't know what is Serverlesspresso, don't worry, we'll get into all the things about this. We will get into Step Functions, we will get into EventBridge, we will get into IoT Core, we'll get into a lot of really interesting things. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode. Today we have an amazing guest. I'm super excited. I think my first guest of the year. I don't know how the recordings are going out, but yeah, when I'm recording this, is the first recording of the yeah. So I have my friend here, developer advocate James Beswick for the Serverless team. So welcome.
Yay! Thanks very much for inviting me. Great to be here.
I'm super happy to have you as a guest. It's the second time you're visiting us, so you're an expert here.
We've just got so much to talk about.
Oh yeah, you should come every week. I have so many things in my list to talk about. But today we are going to talk about something really cool I saw in reinvent. I love coffee. I live in Finland. If you know, Finns are the highest coffee drinkers in the world. They drink over 12 kilos of coffees a year, and I think in my family we go around 24 kilos a year. We drink a lot of coffee here. So when I saw this in Vegas, I was like, yes, good coffee, I need this. And I'm talking about the Serverlesspresso, the two best things in the world, and there was even chocolate there. So
that was our idea too. We thought we'd take the two things we love most and put them together.
Yes, you make me so happy because the coffee was so good. So let me show the audience a little video I made and show them what I'm talking about, and then we come back so you get the experience. So good. So now you understand what I'm meaning. This was amazing. It was just everything, no speaking, no nothing, just getting your coffee from your mobile phone and look and drink it. And it was really tasty.
Yeah, it was actually a really interesting idea. We had this idea a couple of years ago and really thought, it'd be cool to have a place in Vegas at reinvent where you could get coffee, order from your phone, and the whole thing would be a serverless workflow. And AWS being the sort of place where nobody ever says no, somebody said, oh, that's a great idea, go build that. And, fast forward to now, and we built this thing. But it was it's just incredible to see it come to life. And we served over 2,000 drinks in 3 days.
Wow, that's crazy. Can you tell a little bit on how the story went? Like when you decided to do that, who built it, how many people were involved, how many months it took? I know it's not full-time work because we have other things to do.
DAs, we have lots of things. From the first idea, that was a couple of years ago, just as a one-page write-up, and we didn't do anything for a while. And it was around September last year where we thought this would be an interesting thing to do because, we had a smaller reinvent footprint. The dev lounge at reinvent was larger, and we wanted to do something more physical and a bit different. So we got the go-ahead to go and do this. And so we built this very, very rough and ready example in about 4 weeks, just to sort of test out various parts of it that needed to be put together. And it was Ben Smith and I who picked this up. And Ben did a lot of the front end stuff, and I did a lot of the back end. And we sort of shared tasks in between.
Every time you do an integration test, did you get a coffee shot?
Yeah, so the best part was when we had this integration working, we had all these tablets and receipt printers and the actual hardware that the baristas would use. I had it on my desk here in the US. Ben's in London. In the morning, he would be testing this, and I'd get into my office and find all these tickets ready, waiting for me to make coffee.
That's cool. So it was printing while you were sleeping, basically.
I'd be sat in bed and I could just hear, and I think, oh, Ben's sending a coffee order.
How to control your colleagues, get them to.
Exactly. But that actually was the trickiest part of the problem, was really the hardware, because we were really giving the baristas something physical they're used to working with. And so they had a tablet, they had these Epson thermal printers that you see in Starbucks and all those sorts of places. And so they were using familiar hardware, but of course we weren't that familiar with it. So we had to learn how to make all that work too.
Yeah, because I think we are so familiar to use a tablet and to put things in the front end, but I think the piece of paper is fundamental for the baristas because they need to know like which orders are they preparing, from whom is this order, and all those things. So
yeah, and we had 2 coffee stations. There was 2 sets of hardware, and the coffee had to be routed to different baristas, and each of them had a paper ticket. And then once the drink was ready, the ticket was given to the customer as well. So
yeah,
there was a lot of like running a real coffee shop to this that was more complicated than actually the serverless side that developed and managed the whole thing.
Yeah, the serverless part was the easy part, as always.
Right.
And how was the development? Like, you started from where you started? Did you do like an architectural diagram? Like we are always tell our customers that they should start from, or we just code from and get something get something done?
There's a sort of just trying things out aspect, I think, in this very early development phase, where we immediately knew we needed step functions. So we started building a step functions workflow. And then as more requirements came in, we started to figure, well, we probably need a microservice for this and there's something else here. And so that very early phase was very organically grown. And then once we'd built the proof of concept, we went back and cleaned up a few things. We'd realized we got a couple of services we probably didn't need, other things we put together. But I'd say that wasn't too difficult. The great thing about the microservice model is I think you tend to make the same mistakes over and over. You either tend to make the services too small or too big. So you try to figure out what the right size is for them.
Yeah, it's always hard to know what is a monolith in the or like overview of your architecture, no? Because it can be like a microservice, it can be a tiny line of code for one, or it can be a huge amount of code for another service. So that's interesting. And you use quite a lot of serverless services, because it's not only step functions and Lambda, but what kind of other services you use? Yeah,
there were 7 primary services. So we have API Gateway.
Wow.
And that's really where the front ends connect to the back end. Lambda does a lot of the custom work. The step functions that's doing all of the orchestration of each individual order. We keep the state of each order in DynamoDB. The front ends themselves, there's 3 different front ends. I can talk about in a little bit. But they're all Vue.js applications, and they're deployed using Amplify Console. And then the messaging back to the front end is handled using IoT Core.
Oh, that's an interesting.
Yeah. And so we're doing orchestration through step functions, but then connecting all these microservices is EventBridge. And that's really the glue that holds the whole thing together and makes it work.
Yeah, but that's how usually we preach how you should use step functions and EventBridge. No, we say step functions for internal communications within your microservices to, for example, track orders, and then EventBridge for inter-microservices connections. So things are kind of decoupled and you can change them easily.
Yeah,
you follow your own message.
Yeah, and I've realized that the words orchestration and choreography are the problem words, because people hear them and they go, well, that sounds hard. But when you see what it's doing, it's a bit more obvious and it's more intuitive when you should do one or the other. But I just think the words aren't very helpful. But it's interesting because, we have some odd functionality in this flow. If a barista doesn't make a drink in 15 minutes, we want the drink order to time out. And so, how do you do that? Well, step functions can do that. Great. But then how do you get the timeout message through to all the different components that need to know? And that's where you've got EventBridge doing this choreography. So just by looking at the features and breaking it down, I think it made it more obvious.
Yeah, and it becomes more natural where to use it. And what was the most surprising thing when you build this thing and you say, okay, this blew our mind as creators of this thing when this thing was running?
Yeah, the few things. I mean, honestly, every time I build anything, and I've built things for 20 years, so pretty aging myself a bit there,
Well, you started very young. Well, you started very young.
Yeah, I did actually. Thank you for that. But I'm still kind of surprised it works. You know, I mean, there's still that factor when you go production that you watch something work. And I think it's the closest thing that we have to magic, frankly, when you see these applications running. It's incredible. So to me, that was the real wow factor, that, you know, we had these thousands of orders, very, very busy environment, and it went off just exactly as planned with nothing that was really surprising from an operational point of view. But then the second side of it was the cost, because we really built this thing to be doing everything we wanted, not actually paying that much attention to how much it would cost. And so at the very end, we thought, well, we should probably figure out, what this costs. And we discovered that, apart from the SMS messaging we'd used, the whole thing worked within free tier. So it actually didn't cost anything.
Wow. What do you use the SNS for?
So what we did is we wanted to customers to be able to sign in to the app so that they could track their drinks and go back multiple days and see, the history and so forth. But we didn't want to collect any personal information from people with logins and passwords and so forth. So we came up with this idea of just having an SMS-based login. So you just put in your phone number, it sends you a one-time code, you put it in, and then you're logged in for good. But obviously at reinvent, we have customers from all over the world. So that's SMS to countries all over the place. And SMS is not cheap, however you implement it. So that was by far the most expensive.
But maybe if you're a coffee place or something like that, you can replace that with Cognito, because then you want to keep track of your customers and you want to keep track of whatever, and Cognito free tier is massive.
Yeah. So. Absolutely. Yeah, if this were a real app and for a coffee shop, I love the idea of just having like a login with Facebook or Google button, and you just allow the login to happen that way, and that wouldn't cost you anything. I think it's 50,000 users.
50,000 active users, so if they're not active,
that's right. Yeah.
It's quite massive. So there will be a very popular coffee place in your.
Yeah, and actually, what we did there is we took the Cognito custom flow, and we essentially attached the SMS to that flow so that it didn't send you passwords and things. It simply allowed that flow to authenticate the user. But it meant all of our customers' phone numbers were being held in Cognito, and they never came to the app. So we never knew who anybody was. We just have a unique identifier in the JOT token, but the phone numbers themselves are held securely incognito.
Yeah, and I think one question now that you're telling all these cool things is like, I'm sure everybody's asking, where is the code for this? Because they want to implement it. Is this available for people to play with and try it and download it?
It is. Let's take a quick look at my computer.
Yes.
So over here, the easiest way to get to this is there's a link, s12d.com/espresso.
It's in the description box of this video. Don't worry about it.
Great. And that then takes you to this page in the Serverlesspresso, in the Serverless Land site, where we've put lots of different resources showing you how this works with different services. And in there, you'll see a link through to the GitHub repo. Now, when you click that link to GitHub, that takes you to this serverless coffee site. And there's quite a lot of code here because we've got front ends and back ends. So there's three different front ends. And then the back ends, we've broken it out into a range of different microservices. And the point here really is that if this were a larger app, you'd want to really break it up into smaller pieces. So we wanted to show how you could go about doing that. And then all of the steps you need to install that are in this README file. It's all deployed with AWS SAM. So you just run through all these various steps. And at the end of it, you have a deployed application.
Wow, that's cool. So if you want to try whatever James is going to show us today, it's all available for you to try it out. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the architecture, because we have been talking about different services and components, and we have shown what it looks like, but show me the code and the architecture.
Yeah. So we've got this presentation that's built into this page. I'll just pull it over here so we can see this.
So if everybody wants to see the diagrams, they're also available in that link.
So this is the architecture, and although there's lots of stuff going on here, it's not really as complicated as it looks. So all the front ends are on the left. They're essentially, you've got a barista front end, that's on the tablets that the baristas use. There's a display app that people looking up at the monitors that you saw in the video, that's what manages all of this. And then there's the ordering app that the customer places the order with. And each of these talks to the order manager service and the QR service on the back end. So going through each of these, order manager collects information about the order. What order did you place? If you're querying your list of orders, what you ordered yesterday. Essentially, any sort of information about the order goes through the order management service. The QR validator is an interesting one. So we had to control the number of orders coming in for the baristas so they didn't get swamped with orders. So the QR code...
because you don't want the baristas to have 2 million orders in their queue.
And people at reinvent like coffee, so we imagined lots of people arriving. So we came up with a system where you had a bucketing system where there are 10 drinks you could order every 5 minutes. And so when you scan the barcode, that calls the QR service and it decrements a counter in DynamoDB. And when that counter hits 0, it turns off the QR code so that people cannot scan anymore and they have to wait for the catch-up.
Nice.
Yeah.
There was this big QR code in the screen that you basically put your phone and then you could go and get an order, but I have not seen it off. So.
Yeah, it's actually it's difficult to keep up making drinks at the pace we allowed them. So every 5 minutes there was a new QR code, but if we had too many orders, it would turn off the QR code when enough orders have come in. Also, if the queue backed up too far, if we got to the point where there were 50 drinks in the queue, it would take the QR code down for a while so that it would enable the baristas to catch up. So all of that was really managed at the QR validator service level. The publisher service was a really interesting service that came about almost by accident. So we had all these events flying around, as you see through here. Everything's being coordinated through EventBridge. And we needed lots of these events to go back to the front end. So an order gets cancelled or a new order comes in or a barista marks an order as completed. And you end up thinking, well, this is a fairly generic thing you want to do. So we created this publisher service that just listens to some events on EventBridge. And ones it's interested in, it pushes back through IoT Core back to the front end. And so really this tiny service that's something like 20 lines of code is the real-time loop back to the front-end applications.
One question, why you didn't use GraphQL for this on AppSync? Did you think about that?
Yeah, we could definitely have done that. It's really because the API calls were fairly minimal. It's a fairly simple app under the covers. We started with API Gateway, and we're trying to show some of the functionality of how you integrate with API Gateway. But in real life, if you were building this in a production app, definitely AppSync would be something to consider.
Yeah, but IoT Core, I think it's an interesting use case because we always look the IoT name and then we discard it right away. But before AppSync was coming, I was using it quite a lot for this type of two-way communication because it's very fast and it's very efficient for, and it's quite cheap. You do it in small scale. If you do it in small scale. I don't know if you do it in big scale. I have not tried.
Yeah. Prior to my life at AWS, I used it in apps where we had up to sort of 10,000 users on mobile apps. And the thing I liked about it was it's really cheap to use. It handles reconnects. So when you have apps that lose their signal or you disconnect from the network, it then handles under the covers the reconnect logic and the missing messages. And it also allows this type of fan-out messaging. So if we want to send a message to every customer, like we've got an emergency at the store's closed, for example, that's built into this app. We send it once through the publisher service and it fans out to everyone who's listening. And so it does all this for you. It's incredibly easy to use, really, just a few lines of code or configuration in the front end and back end. And so I'm a huge fan of using this as a way of getting information into front ends and making them real time.
And how you do the authentication with IoT Core? Because with GraphQL and AppSync, you need to integrate it either with Cognito or other things. Usually, Cognito is the way to go. But what about IoT Core?
Yeah, so it really is the same thing. You use Cognito, but there's an authenticated role and an unauthenticated role. And it's really up to you how you choose to use them. So in this case, what we did is for the unauthenticated role, this is where we publish things that are about the app, but not about a user, such as the store is closed or a menu has changed or something of that nature. And for the authenticated role, we limit that to information about your order per customer so that there's no risk of seeing other people's orders.
That's cool. Yeah, if people don't know that are watching, Cognito has these two roles that you can define what kind of permissions you give when the user has logged in or when the user has not logged in. So this is also great for showing, like James was saying, different type of information and not leaking anything private out. So that's cool. And then you have EventBridge.
Yeah. So this is great. So EventBridge really is the core of this application in terms of the messaging. So all the time, everything's publishing events. And we try to make this like real life where we publish too many events. We don't know how they're being used. So we simply over-publish. And every service is saying, I got an event, I stored it, I wrote it, I changed, I did this and the other. And that's all going into the EventBridge bus. And then services only subscribe to the things they care about. But one of the common mistakes people make when they start building decoupled apps is they try to match the message to the consumer. And so we deliberately didn't do that. We designed each one as an isolated service where it had no idea how the messages might be used in the future. So it just published like crazy, and there's messages coming in for everything.
Yeah. And did you do like some kind of event design or you just like basically, as you were saying, like just publish when everything happens, just publish and then we will figure out what is the flow or how you design this?
Yeah, we actually did it in a fairly ad hoc basis. And I think going back, if we probably could have done a better job of designing our event flow because, when you go from version 1 to 2 to 3 of events, you add attributes, you change things, you move things around. And that caused more friction for us simply because we'd not done the work to properly discover the way the event should work. So we're currently building a workshop version of this. And we took that as a note to make sure when we did it a second time, we discovered the events properly.
Yeah, because I think that's quite a common thing because step functions are quite like easy because you need to make the process. So it's quite natural to think about the step function. But when you're working with events, you just whatever. And then you don't document anything. And then you start like, oh, I don't remember how I did this. And then you need to go into the code and jump and see what is going on.
Yeah. And it's actually, what was interesting about using EventBridge this way, well, there are two side effects. One is when we ran this in reinvent, we had archive replay turned on. So we have a complete archive of all the activity for the day. So we can replay that in our test environment whenever we make changes to the code. So it's a really effective way for us to make sure we've not broken things. And then we came up with this idea of a coffee journey feature in the front end. So that once you've got your cup of coffee, you can see which service touched the cup of coffee, and you get this report showing when it was stored in DynamoDB, when it was picked up by API Gateway, and the information is unique to your drink, and all of that comes from EventBridge events.
Nice. Do you have some kind of Lambda function or something that is building that?
Kind of log of actually, events? It's very. Yeah, it's. I think it's not shown in this diagram, but it's a service that basically listens to those events, stores them in its own DynamoDB cache. And then when it gets the final event, the coffee's been made, it pulls all the events for that order, sorts it, and just renders it in an HTML form and sends it to the customer. But the service that does that is very small. I think it's only about 100 lines of code.
Are you using your own event bus for all of this? Or you're using the one that the account has?
Yeah, so this is all a custom event bus called Serverlesspresso. So for cron jobs, there's a cron job that runs each night where we reset order numbers and that kind of thing. That has to go to the default bus because it's a cron job. But everything that's custom to Serverlesspresso just goes to the custom bus.
Yeah, I think in general that's a good practice because then you can do, for example, what you were just saying to check all the events is so easy to filter. Basically, give me all the events that has go through here and store them in a Dynamo table and do things with it. And sometimes
I think there's been a lot of changes with EventBridge this year that make it a lot easier to work with custom buses across different accounts and different regions. So, when EventBridge first came out, I use the default bus for everything because I tended to want to use a lot of that functionality. But these days, I tend to split out one application per bus.
Yeah, I try to do the same. At least if I'm going to build something a little bit bigger with more microservices, because it makes it so simple. Like, for example, to create these audit logs and things like that. That sometimes it's great to have visibility on what is going on, because I always say that event-driven applications is like herding cats. It's very hard to know what everybody's doing there. It's just like...
Yeah. And actually, it's something we learned along the way, because, when we were in the point of designing this on the fly and the proof of concept, you're adding services, you're pulling away services, events are changing all the time. We had 2 people working on the project. And so if you imagine a team doing that, everybody's sending you events, and you get to this point of not really understanding what's happening. And so we found that we could just take the bus, take every event, write it to CloudWatch logs, and then tail the log file. And essentially, it became a single point of truth where you could watch the log file for every event going through. And so in the very early stages of us putting together, that was like having a server back in the times when you just tail one file. It helped a lot.
I imagine, and that's a great trick for people starting with this, because sometimes we get just super confused. I never put everything in one CloudWatch, but I will try it next time. I usually have one Dynamo table that has everything, and I keep on refreshing it to see what is going on. But I think the CloudWatch it's even better, because you can just tail it there and keep it in your terminal.
Yeah, it's definitely just one of those things where it's simple, but it works. And then once we got to a sufficiently complex number of events going on, we found a really good open source tool called Atlas, where we then were able to attach that and get this visualization of what was producing the events and where they were going and all the routing. And that was incredibly helpful.
Wow. What is that tool again?
It's called Atlas. Let me just dig that up.
Yeah, because I think the people watching and me will be very interested in it. We always want new tools in our lives.
Yeah, the community's created many different tools for EventBridge that is incredibly helpful. But this is one I really liked, that it's just EventBridge Atlas. And if you view the examples, it shows you what, in a very simple way, what's producing your events and what's going on. So, we had, 8 or 9 services in the end. And this was just invaluable in helping us understand what was going on.
Wow, I love that. I'm definitely going to get a use of it, because this is amazing to visualize everything. Yeah.
And so, I think with events, they're incredibly powerful, but this sort of out of order factor, and it can be very noisy in terms of what's producing events. So getting your tooling right and your approach right can definitely help just make life easier when you're consuming them for other services.
Yeah, and to understand what is inside the event, sometimes you don't know what is inside the event. You need to basically consume it, console log it to see what is inside. So it's kind of nice to be able to see it somewhere else and explore it if you don't have documented what is inside the event.
Yeah, I think there's different ways of approaching this. I mean, you can have it where the event just gets larger and larger as it moves throughout your application. You sort of append things to it. And that works for things like this. It's not a super complicated app, but you have to watch for the event hitting a maximum size. Or you can try to just have more events and not have one monolithic event per transaction. So you play with these different approaches. It really depends on what you're building as to which one will work for you.
Yeah, that's a great point. That sometimes I have seen that, for example, for things that change a lot, people just send, IDs, and then they do the work of going to the service again and querying the thing again, like fresh out. But I think I will say that's kind of, you have to take it very carefully, because things change, and then when the event comes, maybe things change again. So and the fat event is always the easiest.
Yeah. And when you go from dev and test, we've got a handful of events to production. It's like suddenly the floodgates open. So this was running an average of 10 events per second when everything was running. And so that's, if you're trying to tail files doing that, it becomes way too noisy to listen to that sort of data. And so having a lot of this figured out ahead of time can really help you when suddenly you get all of this traffic.
Yeah, exactly. And also when you want to extend your service, because in a way, the fat event, you always have everything inside. So it's kind of easy to just call anything out of it. But if you need like a specific event, maybe you need to listen to exactly that thing to get exactly that information. So, but that's part of the design process that I was asking at the beginning, how you did it.
It's definitely a tricky decision because the fat event can become the monolith in your app if you're not careful. Yeah. And it has all the convenience of having sequencing built in. That you can store the events in an order in which they happen within this big event itself. But I have, in many cases, I think it's too much. I think it's better to use the inherent, nature of the way events work and then consume them in a way where you can reassemble them as needed.
And with the FAT event, another thing you need to be careful is the information you're sharing between microservices, because in this case, this is just coffee, but sometimes it might be personal information or something sensible. So you need to be careful what you're putting inside your FAT event because you don't know who is going to read it.
Yeah, and we try to also be fairly purist in the design where each microservice has its own data store. So there's no microservices, poking into DynamoDB tables elsewhere.
That's good.
Everything's got an API or it's got an event that triggers the service. So they're all independent in that way. But you do find that you have to have a pretty good strategy for how you're going to manage the eventing when you do it.
Yeah. And then you have the step function at the end. Is that part of some kind of microservice or it's its own thing or how you?
Yeah, this is essentially the engine of what manages your drink order. So this is the step functions workflow. So at the very beginning of the flow, it has to check if the store is open. So we gave the baristas the opportunity to close the store when problems happened, which is good because one of the coffee machines broke down one day, so they needed to take it down for 30 minutes. So when that happened, any incoming orders would have been stopped at this stage because the store was then closed. At that point, it checks to see if there's capacity available. It does that by seeing the number of open workflows that are currently out there. So we set a limit of 50 drinks. Once you get to 50 drinks, we figured that was too many for a barista to catch up. So it would then, any more orders would be rejected if they reached beyond that capacity number.
So each workflow, like execution of the step functions, count as one of these workflows. So it's checking how many of these are running.
Yeah, so each one of these workflows is one drink. And so it's checking how many open workflows there are currently running.
Cool.
And then at that point, it emits an event saying that it's ready for the drink order. So at this point, you haven't yet placed the order. You've simply scanned the barcode and you've got a place in the queue. So that emits an event which the front end picks up and it then renders the page showing the order menu. And this is a step where it can time out. So if we don't get a response back from the customer in 5 minutes, it will then go off into this order timeout step over here. And that also publishes its own event, which then tells the front end that the timeout has happened. If the customer places the order, that goes through that order manager service and then uses this task token to start the step function and let it continue on to the next step. At that point, you generate an order number. So although there's an order number internally, it's a long GUID, which isn't human readable. The order number is human readable. So it's like order 1, order 2, order 3, and it's sequential. And so that's the step that generates the order number. And then at this point, that's just a logging step. And then you get to this point where we're now waiting for the barista to complete making the drink. And so it stops at this point, emits an event to the event bus saying the drink is ready. That's picked up by the barista's tablet and displays the order on their tablet. And when they indicate that they've made the drink, that then goes back through the order manager, which then sends the task token to step functions and continues the workflow. If they don't complete making the drink in 15 minutes, that also times out. So this is the timeout path over here. And if that then continues, then we determine if the order was cancelled or it was completed. Cancelled means that the barista said, I can't make this order, and they cancel it. Which also happened because we ran out of soy milk a couple of times and they had to cancel those orders. So we handled a number of exceptions in this process where things could go wrong beyond the happy path. But if everything went well, then that's the green path that you would see here.
Yeah, and how you design the not happy path? what you had in mind when you were building those steps?
Yeah, this was really by trial and error, because this is obviously a proof of concept and we had certain limitations we put in place around this QR code scanning. The original version of this, we'd assumed that the order was placed when the step functions flow kicked off.
Okay.
But in fact, that wasn't how we wanted it to work. We wanted the step function flow to be started by the QR code scan itself, at which point the customer hadn't decided on what to order. And so that was a fundamental shift in what the step functions workflow was doing. And then a lot of the exceptions came naturally as we made mistakes. So as we were developing the front end, we thought, well, we've only allowed the barista to complete an order, but what happens if they need to cancel? And then we thought, we need to change that in the step function workflow. Unfortunately, with the new work, with the step functions GUI that we have now, it's incredibly easy. We literally were doing it on the fly, dragging and dropping steps.
Oh, you did it with the Workflow Studio?
Yeah. It's so much easier. And then actually, it's a bit nerve-wracking when you do it originally, because you've built these services, and you're not quite sure if you're going to blow everything up when you just change the flow. And so it's kind of amazing that you're just changing the flow, and it's working in real time as we were building the app in development. So that's pretty much how we figured out the things that could go wrong. And then the timeouts happened because we just thought, there's all sorts of reasons why somebody might order a drink and walk off to another thing they see at reinvent, or the baristas are unable to complete the order, and we needed to be able to give it an out to let the orders fail. I think over the course of the event of 2,000 orders, 95 customers timed out, and the baristas timed out 23 times.
Wow, that's good. Yeah, my order almost timed out because people were talking to me when I was trying to figure out if I wanted a latte or a cappuccino, and my brain doesn't multitask. So I was like, please shut up. I need to think this important thing. Stop talking to me.
Yeah, I did the same thing. So we have admin users in this too. So a regular customer can only order one drink per day, so that more customers can get a drink. But admin users can order as many as they want. So I was an admin user. We did this just in case there was a problem and we could order a drink directly for a customer. And so I had the phone, and I was placing orders a couple of times when people had forgotten their phone, or they couldn't get it working for some reason. And so I'm responsible for a few timeouts as well.
Yeah, but that's cool. And what about the step function? What is calling? Is it calling like service integrations? Is it calling Lambda functions?
Yeah, so this is a fascinating story, actually. So back in September, when we had this proof of concept we were building out, the step functions integration work wasn't released yet. So we had everything basically either you're generally calling a Lambda function or doing something in the step. So a lot of Lambda functions doing this code integration work for us. So you want to write something to DynamoDB, you call a Lambda function, it does the work. You want to send something to EventBridge, you call a Lambda function, it sends it to EventBridge. And we got to the point where the app was ready, and then they released these changes to step functions with the SDK integration. And we thought, well, the application works, we could just leave it at this point because it's stable and we want to get to reinvent, or, we could change everything. And so we started this process of changing it. And what was incredible was just how much code just completely disappeared, because you could take a step function step and publish directly to EventBridge or write directly to a DynamoDB table. And so it's just a shame that didn't come out 6 months earlier, because we would have saved the first round. But I'm now really familiar with how you take existing step functions workflows and use these integrations.
That's cool. Do you have 1 or 2 tips for the audience that will start doing that as soon as they hear you saying that you can change it easily?
Yeah, I suppose DynamoDB is a key one. So understanding what the queries are that you have in your Lambda function and bringing those in as queries saves a lot of time. One thing to note, though, is if you're using the document client in Lambda, it doesn't work the same way in step functions. You have this serialized format that tripped us up originally because we didn't have the attribute types listed in the JSON object. And so that's one thing to bear in mind if you're using the doc client when you move your queries from Lambda. But of course, when you do that, it's faster because you've got fewer services that you're interacting with. And it's you've got a lot less code. The SAM template, or CDK if you prefer, becomes a lot easier. And the same with EventBridge. You want to start publishing directly to EventBridge from these steps. Really, you just take the payload that you had in the Lambda function and pull that into your Step Functions workflow. So the hardest thing I'd say is there's so many SDK integrations. There's over 3,000, I think.
Yeah.
So you have to find which ones you want to use, and that can take a while discovering all of those.
Yeah, but I think it's quite straightforward with the ones that you're familiar with, because the APIs are documented. Sometimes they are very different, one service from the other, how they're using the SDK. And when you're using the integration, it gets a little frustrating. Why this is like this and this is like that? But, we are a decentralized company.
Exactly. But I think the couple of the most useful ones for us were the DynamoDB piece. I think is really transformational. Being able to have steps that write directly to DynamoDB means
S3 for me.
Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, S3 is wonderful. And EventBridge. So anything that you want your step function to let the world know about, but you don't know what for yet, you just let it publish an event through EventBridge, and you build extensibility into your application from day one.
Yeah. One thing to have in mind that is like validations become a little harder if you want to make validations, for example, on storing things in Dynamo. With Step Functions, it becomes a little bit challenging. And also testing is harder because you cannot do unit tests. I don't know, maybe that's something we should ask more, how to test the functions, because they're becoming really great, but I want to know how to test them. Maybe I should ask Dan about that. But those are for me the biggest challenge. But S3 for me, that was amazing, because how many times you want to get a file or put a file in S3, for example, to use transcribe or translate. Now you can do everything from Step Functions. No need to call lambdas. It's just like, wow.
I think it's really a transformational change they brought to the service, and it's the thing I'm most excited about in the last year. Because when I saw it, I thought it was good. I thought it was interesting, but only from really playing with it, I've realized I think this could be the future of writing many serverless applications. Many applications have this kind of orchestration, and you can build it around the orchestration and choreography model and reduce the amount of code. So I think over time this will get better and better, and it's really amazing. One thing about input validation, I meant to mention that because obviously you should sanitize your inputs always.
Yeah. And
with this, it's tricky because you've got a menu on the front end that could change because drinks go out of stock, and there's various inventory things. And so a customer submits an order for a cappuccino, and it's made with soy milk, or it's got vanilla flavoring, and so you get these fairly complicated orders. And so our validation wasn't so much is a number within a certain range, or is this string doing this? It's actually, is this menu item still valid? And so there's actually a step in here where it goes and checks the menu and compares the order with what's currently on the menu. So if something goes out of stock at the last minute, it can reject the order. So that was something we did entirely in Step Functions, and it was pretty interesting to see how it works.
Yeah, that's cool, because sometimes, we think, we control the input because the menu is basically control for us. It's just they cannot input anything that is not in the menu, but then things get out of stock and things get bad, and so you always need to do sanitation and make sure that your data is still valid.
Yeah, never forget, anybody can press F12 in a browser and see your API endpoint and what's being passed to it, so you should always sanitize your input.
Yes. Don't trust your front end. Everything is public. Yeah, and I would like to go a little bit more in depth in the IoT Core, because at least for me, when I saw this was something very interesting, because since I think AppSync was born, I have not seen many implementations that are not IoT with IoT Core, and I don't think I ever talk about this in this channel. So if you have some slide on that or some more information, I would like to see it.
Let's see. There's a lot of stuff in this deck.
There is a lot of stuff, and that's available for everybody to go and look.
Yeah, so this IoT Core approach, I discovered by accident probably 5 years ago when I was building a mobile app, and we needed to get information back to the front end. And at the time, I really wanted to use serverless, but there was no serverless WebSocket concept. And so you end up having to either build your own or using a third-party service or something more complicated and more heavyweight than what you wanted to do. And there's also API gateway WebSockets as well, which is an option. But in this case, we've got this issue where we have messages going backwards and forwards, and we want to be able to fan out at times. We want to be able to publish an order about a drink, but that drink may be going to the customer who ordered it, to the barista, to the TV screen app that's showing the orders. Or, if the store closes or the menu changes, that goes to a large number. And so if you use API Gateway WebSockets, you have to manage that fan-out process internally. And that's not something we wanted to do in this case. And so MQTT, as a protocol that this supports, it's actually relatively straightforward. I used it, funnily enough, in a very old job I had in the bank where we had trading systems and market data. And it's a way of essentially structuring your messages going backwards and forwards and letting people subscribe to topics, and then you just publish on topics. So in this case, each user has a topic, which is their user ID, and the app itself has a general topic for app scale events. But that way, we can really easily publish a message saying, a drink is ready because we know the user ID and we know the drink. And we publish it to that topic for that drink. Now, the nice thing about this when we started working this out was that EventBridge makes it super easy. So we had these events that were an order is placed, it's cancelled, a QR code scanned, and so forth. The Lambda function in the publisher service listens to what the source is of certain events it knows it's interested in. And then it then restructures that event to use the topics and pushes it into IoT Core. And then as you see on the right-hand side of this diagram, it's a bit tiny, I'll make it a bit bigger. The user topics automatically then get routed to the ordering app. The admin topics go to where they need to in the display or barista app, and any configuration topics can go to all three depending on what's happening. But the scale here really happens for you automatically. So if you had a couple of thousand users who are there at the same time, you don't really need to do anything beyond send the message and let the service do the work.
Yeah, and then in your front end or client applications, you're using like AWS SDK to basically listen to this endpoint or something like that.
Yeah, what we can do, at least if I can just pull this up, if I can find it very quickly. I'll go to the barista app as an example. This is a Vue.js application. We have this component that actually, you'll see it in Innovator Island and other things that I've done. I've made it fairly generic at this point. Let me just make this a bit larger. So this is Vue.js, so it's simply a component that has no template. We just drop it into the parent main component. It uses the IoT device SDK. This one is only subscribing to one topic. It's just Serverlesspresso admin, whereas you'll see on the other apps, they subscribe to different topics. And then what happens down here, this looks scary, but it's not as bad as it looks. So when this gets started, it gets credentials, and that's authenticated or unauthenticated role that we were talking about. And once that then gets finished, it then goes and mounts the IoT setup here. It gets the configuration from the main app. These are things like your user pool ID, host, and region, and so forth. Once it has that, it goes and makes the connection. Here's all the connection data for the IoT device. And then when it first connects, we just log this out, but it then subscribes to that topic at the top you saw, the Serverlesspresso admin, makes the subscription. If there's an error, we'll log that out and it'll retry. It usually happens because the credentials are out of date, so it needs to rotate the token. So that happens, if the app's been open for several days. And then once you've got this connection, you're then listening to messages that are coming in. So in this case, we just use a switch statement, but you could find a more elegant approach in a production app, where we're listening to each one of these types of event, and then just emitting it through a Vue.js emitter. Oh. And then the components in the app are actually not even listening to IoT; they're just listening to events within the emitter service within the event itself. And so this widget that I think I wrote 2 years ago. The only code I generally change is the topic that you're connecting to, and then the messages that you want to subscribe to.
Yeah, the switch.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I love those pieces of code that you can copy and paste and use forever.
Yes, because the most difficult part was figuring out this initial connection part. That was fairly difficult because we're working with multiple services and making sure it works as expected. And at some point, we ended up wrapping them in promises too, which was another factor, having to figure out exactly how that worked. But it got to the point where I remember just setting it up so that that's the part you need to change.
Yeah, sometimes promises in JavaScript are a pain.
Honestly, when I understand how they work and I've written something that works, I feel so incredibly successful with promises. And other times when they don't work, I feel like I shouldn't be using JavaScript anymore. And it's just, you never know.
I know the feeling. But for me, the launch of Await and Async was a revelation, make my life so much easier with JavaScript. Because
It really does. And I think, in Vue.js, and I think in React to some extent as well, it works really well with the event model that these applications have. So essentially, you're just taking something from the AWS infrastructure and feeding that into the event model of Vue.js. And it's very seamless, to be honest. It's actually also very easy to mock events when you're in the testing phase and you're just building out the front end. So it's a process I've come to really like, and it's relatively simple for the capabilities it gives your application.
Front-end people kind of use event many years before we started using it in the backend. So
yeah, and this is why I love talking to front-end people, because often they have a view that the backend is difficult because they've seen how it was a long time ago. But today, if you are familiar with events in the front end, you can become very powerful in the back end too, because you've got all these tools like EventBridge. And many back-end developers, this is a new thing to them. So, I think it's time for the front-end devs to start looking into the back-end now.
Yeah. And I have one, I think maybe last question, because we are already talking for over almost an hour. Yeah, time flies. How you hosted this? You said that everything is in Amplify. Are you using Amplify also for, well, now we saw the IoT, you are not using Amplify, but for other things, are you using Amplify or using AWS SDK, or how the use of Amplify
Yeah,
is
a bit of
here?
both, actually. So, at the time, we loved the Amplify auth package because it gives you all the UIs and all the sort of flow of how you reset passwords. But it didn't support, at the time, the SMS feature we wanted to roll in. And so we use it in a hybrid way where we use the Amplify connection to manage connections to the back end and get events when things change in auth status and that kind of thing. But we're actually rendering our own auth screen because we're using SMS. But we're using Amplify console. I still think that's just incredible for front-end developers because you just commit your code to GitHub, and each time you make a change, you have a fully hosted application with an HTTPS endpoint and a certificate managed for you. And you look at the scale we had, where we had all these thousands of users, and it still was in free tier. So for me, this made it very, very straightforward for managing 3 completely separate applications.
Yeah, that's super cool because I love the console for that, because we are so familiar with GitHub, and if we can just push why to make it more complicated. Yeah. So, for example, you said that everything is deployed by infrastructure as code. So basically, you created these Amplify applications as infrastructure as code. Everything with some.
Yeah, absolutely everything. Yeah, and we set out when we first started building from the point of view that it had to be deployable from the GitHub repo. Like there were no tricks behind the scenes where you had to have something set up a certain way, that anybody should be able to go there, run the README, and have these deployable apps. But the tooling is so good these days compared to where it was 5 years ago that you can very straightforwardly build something that's relatively complex in what it's doing with surprisingly little code and run it from these repos this way. So we're really happy with the way it came out.
Yeah, because I think that solution is something I've been now exploring for a while, to create the Amplify app and all the backend components and everything that the Amplify app is going to use through infrastructure as code. And it's something that people are not maybe sometimes familiar with, because when they see Amplify, they see always using it by CLI and creating all the resources there. But I think the more mature production way, if you want to build a full system with Amplify, it's just using it from infrastructure as code, and it works amazingly. You can do all kind of integrations and build all pieces of backend, and you can do it with SAM, CDK, whatever you like. So it's nice that you're using it.
It's definitely going to become the preferred way to build things, I think, for many apps, because like a lot of these opinionated tools, it works incredibly well for 80% or 90% of the cases. And so I think, generally when you build things, it's good to start with those tools. And then if you have some requirement that doesn't fit, then, explore something else. But I mean, for what we build, most of the time, it's where we would start.
Yeah, and Amplify is really cool. And do you have something else to tell us about this?
Yeah, so we're going to be building a workshop, or we currently are building a workshop, and that will be ready most likely by the end of March 2022, even better. 2022?
2002.
Yeah, 2002. Ignore me. I'm here all week. So the end of March this year. And we're going to be bringing that to AWS summits and other events. So you'll be able to come to a summit, get your Serverlesspresso coffee from the booth, see how it works, and then go and build your own version of it in one of our workshops.
Yeah, and you can change the drink for something else, maybe?
Yeah. You can change the menu on the fly. In fact, this was designed so that we didn't know at some point if coffee would be supported because of the way that COVID was happening. And so we designed it so we could add T-shirt printing and other things happening too. So you could modify this code to work for any type of production workflow, not even including coffee.
Nice. So when the link is available, it will be in the description box, so you can go and check the workshop. James promised to share it with me. And all the links that James mentioned today are also in the description box, so you can go and check the GitHub repo, the slides, and everything that has been built around this amazing thing, serverless and coffee. Next time you put unicorns into it, and then we're good.
We'll do that.
Yeah, the unicorns is the game days always are using unicorn. Yeah, so thank you very much, James. I will leave all your networks as well in the description box if people have any questions and want to reach out to you.
Well, thanks very much for having me on, Marcy. It's been great chatting to you.
Thank you, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. Thanks, bye.
So thank you for watching the interview. It was super fun to talk with James today, and I hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comments who you would like me to interview in the future. I have a list, but I'm always happy to hear what your opinions are. And I see you in the next episode of FooBar. Ciao, ciao!